Previously in the story, after Raven becoming a sentient NPC traveling in the connected games and meeting different characters and players, he was given his first quest battling unknown creatures from a portal and winning it. After that, he met the last character from the 7th game that was added after the battle. Fizzletop was a different NPC from the rest that Raven met. Additionally, she didn't want to join Raven and his team to enter WonderWhimsy adventures. Chapter 6. They stood on a floating island with a candy-colored sky above and a patchwork quilt of vibrant biomes stretching out below. Enormous mushrooms dotted the landscape, and rivers of sparkling liquid gold snaked through the valleys. The air smelled faintly of sugar and flowers. "This is unsettling," Thalric muttered, his eyes darting around. "It feels like we've stepped into a child's dream." "It's kind of beautiful," Aelira said, her voice tinged with awe. As they began their exploration, they encountered players from WonderWhimsy Adventures who had ventured into this newly connected world. Many were younger gamers or casual players, and they looked up at Raven and his team with wide-eyed amazement. "Are they from another game?" one player whispered to another. "I think so. Look at their gear. It's way too detailed to be from WonderWhimsy." The players had begun to traverse the 7 connected games with growing excitement, using the portals to explore worlds they had only heard about before. Some formed cross-game parties, looting treasures from unfamiliar dungeons, or teaming up to tackle challenging quests that were now accessible thanks to the interconnected platform. Raven couldn't help but notice how the players treated this phenomenon like a grand adventure. To them, it was an unprecedented opportunity to experience something extraordinary. But to him, it was a puzzle that demanded answers. As they delved deeper into WonderWhimsy Adventures, Raven and his team uncovered peculiar artifacts that seemed out of place even in this whimsical world. One such artifact was a crystalline shard that pulsed faintly with energy. Raven picked it up, studying its intricate patterns. "This doesn't belong here," he murmured. "Do you think it's connected to the portals?" Aelira asked. "Possibly," Raven replied, "but we need more information." Meanwhile, back in Eldoria, Fizzletop's search for food had taken her to a bustling market square. She delighted the players she encountered with her quirky personality, asking for candy bars, chocolate, or anything sweet. "Wait, NPCs can eat now?" one player asked, astonished. "Apparently," another replied, handing Fizzletop a cookie from their inventory. She devoured it with glee, her eyes lighting up. "This is amazing. Best cookie ever," she declared, spinning in circles. The gaming community couldn't get enough of her antics. Streams and forums buzzed with clips of Fizzletop interacting with players, her hunger and zest for life setting her apart from the usual NPC behavior. As Raven and his team pressed on in WonderWhimsy Adventures, the gaming world continued to speculate about what other games might join the 7 now connected. The possibilities seemed endless, and the excitement only grew. For Raven, however, the stakes were higher than mere curiosity. Somewhere in these worlds lay the key to unraveling the truth, and he was determined to find it, even if it meant venturing into the unknown again and again. As Raven wandered through the vibrant, whimsical landscapes of WonderWhimsy Adventures, his mind was far from the candy-colored world around him. The crystalline shard in his hand felt warm, pulsing faintly as though alive. He clenched it tightly, hoping for some revelation, but the fragmented memories he had gathered so far were frustratingly incomplete. Each step through this strange land seemed to raise more questions than answers. "This place is absurd," Thalric muttered, glancing warily at a tree that appeared to be made entirely of spinning pinwheels. "How do you even take a world like this seriously? It may look ridiculous, but don't underestimate it," Aelira said, her tone sharp. "There's something about this place. It's too deliberately crafted, like it's hiding something important beneath all the fluff." Kael shrugged. "Whatever it is, we'll find it. We always do." Raven barely registered their conversation, his focus narrowing as the shard's pulsing quickened. He raised it toward a nearby glimmering waterfall, its cascade of liquid light shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The shard reacted, glowing brighter as they approached. "This has to mean something," Raven murmured, stepping closer. Before they could investigate further, a loud chime echoed through the air, startling them. A notification appeared in their vision, floating like a holographic message. Simultaneously, the same announcement began flooding the internet in the real world. Attention, players! A new chapter awaits. The message was accompanied by a cryptic teaser. The 7 worlds are just the beginning. A new challenge arises, bringing excitement, danger, and glory. Are you ready for what comes next? Stay tuned. Players across all 7 games erupted into a frenzy. Forums, social media platforms, and live streams buzzed with speculation. What could this mean? Was a new world about to be unveiled? Was this an expansion, an event, or something else entirely? Theories ranged from wild guesses to detailed analysis of previous updates. "This is no coincidence," Raven said, his voice grim. He turned to his companions, who looked equally uneasy. "Something or someone is orchestrating this, and they're pulling the strings for a reason." Far away, in a hidden digital space beyond the reach of players and NPCs, a shadowy figure hunched over a console. Lines of glowing code danced across the screen, their complexity far beyond anything the developers of the 7 games had ever created. The figure's fingers moved with inhuman speed, weaving the code together like an intricate tapestry. "It's time for the next stage," the figure whispered, their voice dripping with anticipation. "Let's see how they handle this." With a final keystroke, the figure executed the program. The code rippled outward like a digital wave, embedding itself within the fabric of the interconnected games. Players, NPCs, and even the game worlds themselves would soon feel its effects. Back in WonderWhimsy Adventures, Raven's group pressed forward, following the shard's guiding light. They entered a grove where the whimsical atmosphere grew oddly quiet. The air was heavy, and the vibrant colors around them seemed muted. In the center of the grove stood a pedestal, its surface etched with symbols that glowed faintly. Raven placed the shard on the pedestal, and the ground beneath them trembled. A beam of light shot upward, piercing the sky and creating a ripple that spread across the world. The whimsical landscape momentarily flickered, revealing glimpses of something darker beneath. "Did you see that?" Aelira asked, her voice hushed. "It's like this world isn't what it seems." "It's a mask," Raven said, his expression grim. "And whatever's beneath it is what we're really dealing with." As the light subsided, a new notification appeared, visible only to Raven and his team. "Congratulations. You've triggered the next phase. Prepare yourselves." Chapter 7. Before they could react, the grove around them dissolved, and they found themselves standing in an unfamiliar place. It was nothing like the whimsical world they had just left. This new environment was stark and foreboding, its skies dark and crackling with energy. The players in WonderWhimsy Adventures were equally stunned as their world began to shift. Areas that had once been light-hearted and cheerful now bore traces of something eerie. The interconnected nature of the 7 games meant the changes were spreading, affecting all the worlds in ways no one could predict. The 7 games became a huge battlefield with different landscapes. Fizzletop, still wandering in Eldoria, paused mid-bite of a pastry she had acquired from a player. Her usually carefree expression turned serious as she glanced toward the sky. "Well, this just got interesting," she said, a sly grin spreading across her face. "Looks like the real fun is about to begin." And somewhere, in that hidden digital space, the shadowy figure leaned back with a satisfied chuckle. "Let the games truly begin." The air grew heavy with tension as Raven stood in the middle of a desolate battlefield, his team beside him. The ground beneath them felt unfamiliar. A patchwork of terrains from each of the 7 games seamlessly merged into a chaotic yet strangely cohesive arena. Aelira, Kael, and Thalric exchanged uneasy glances, their weapons drawn, their gazes scanning their surroundings. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of energy emanating from the environment. Raven clenched his fists, his sharp eyes darting around. "This isn't like the last time. Something's different." Before they could speculate further, A system-wide notification appeared in glowing golden letters across the sky. Stage 2. Trial of Titans begins. Far beyond the battleground, players from all over the world sat in front of their screens. Their characters automatically logged in without warning. Confusion erupted in global chat channels as thousands of players found themselves thrust into the game, unable to log out. Even the most seasoned gamers felt a pang of unease, their usual confidence faltering. Is this a bug? What's going on? Why can't I log out? This is insane. Meanwhile, Aris, Tink, and Darius, the other NPCs Raven had met in Arcanis, were transported to entirely different sections of the arena. Each found themselves alone, separated not only from Raven but from each other. They looked around in confusion, their usual behaviors overridden by a strange awareness. For the first time, they felt the weight of uncertainty, a trait previously reserved for players, not NPCs. In one corner of the arena, Aris found herself in a shadowy forest, the air thick with an eerie mist. Her sharp instincts kicked in as she gripped her dual daggers tightly. "This isn't Arcanis. What is this place?" she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. Tink, in contrast, was transported to a vibrant mechanical wasteland, a mix of industrial ruins and advanced machinery. The clinking of metal and the hiss of steam filled the air as he adjusted his goggles, his engineering tools at the ready. "Well, this is different," he said, trying to keep his voice light despite the tension crawling up his spine. Darius stood atop a windswept plateau, the ground beneath him cracked and dry. The vast expanse of the battlefield stretched out before him, and for the first time he felt an odd sense of vulnerability. He gripped his greatsword tightly, scanning the horizon for any sign of allies or enemies. Similarly, all the players with different traits and abilities were also transported to the battlefield. The players in WonderWhimsy didn't know how to react as they aren't the fight-type character nor magic wielder. The players are in chaos as they find themselves in different areas of the arena. Back in Raven's section of the battlefield, a low rumble began to echo through the air. The sky darkened unnaturally, swirling with thunderous clouds. Lightning flashed, illuminating a massive portal that tore open in the heavens. Raven's team instinctively braced themselves as an oppressive energy radiated from the rift. Across the entire arena, the players, the Echoed and Raven's team froze, their unease growing into palpable fear. Global chat erupted with frantic messages. "What the hell is that? Is this part of the game? Why does this feel real?" The developers, glued to their screens, watched in stunned silence. Every attempt to access the servers or manipulate the code failed. They were mere spectators now, just like the millions of players and viewers tuning into the live streams. And then they emerged. From the portal descended massive figures, each one towering over the battlefield like ancient gods of war. Giants, clad in gleaming armor and futuristic battle suits, stepped into the arena with deliberate, earth-shaking movements. Their faces were obscured by intricate helmets, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Each carried weapons of unimaginable scale, blades the size of towers, hammers that could crush mountains, and cannons that pulsed with raw energy. The sight of them sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. "Titans?" Thalric whispered, his voice barely audible. "How are we supposed to fight that?" Kael muttered, his usual bravado faltering. Aelira took a step back, her bow trembling in her hands. This isn't like anything we've faced before." Raven remained silent, his eyes locked on the giants. Despite the fear gnawing at his core, he forced himself to stay calm. "We don't have a choice. We fight. We survive." As if on cue, the giants began to move, their thunderous footsteps shaking the ground. The battlefield erupted into chaos as smaller portals opened, unleashing waves of monstrous creatures that served as the Titans' minions. These creatures, grotesque amalgamations of flesh and metal, charged toward the scattered players with terrifying speed. For the first time, the players felt powerless. Their usual strategies and tactics seemed laughable against the overwhelming might of the enemies. But amidst the chaos, Raven's voice rang out. "Form ranks. Focus on the smaller ones first. Keep moving. His command cut through the noise, rallying those nearby. Players who had never fought together before instinctively followed his lead, forming impromptu alliances. The battlefield became a whirlwind of spells, arrows, and blades as they tried to hold their ground against the onslaught. The minions were relentless, their thick, metallic skin repelling most attacks. It took the combined effort of 3 teams to bring down a single one, leaving them exhausted and disheartened. Potions were chugged frantically, but the players' HP bars still fluctuated dangerously. The healers barely managed to heal some, and most of them had depleted their mana. The mages and beasts players were also doing their best to suppress the enemies. The WonderWhimsy players tried running in different directions, hiding in every corner they found. Explosions from the Titans' distant swings scattered the combatants further, dividing them into smaller, struggling groups. Aris, meanwhile, had managed to rally a few players who had fled into her forested section of the arena. "We need a plan," she urged, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We can't fight them head-on, but maybe we can find their weak points." "If they even have weak points," one player muttered grimly, clutching a bleeding arm. Elsewhere, Tink and Darius found themselves amidst a group of players, each fighting desperately to stay alive. Tink's ingenuity kept them alive longer than most, his makeshift traps and explosives buying precious moments of reprieve. Darius, ever the protector, stood at the forefront, cutting down waves of minions with powerful, sweeping strikes. But even they knew their efforts were a mere drop in the ocean of enemies. High above, the shadowy figure watched it all unfold, his amusement evident. He leaned back into the void-like throne that surrounded him, his fingers tapping rhythmically. "Magnificent," he murmured, a smirk spreading across his face. "Let's see how long they last." The battle raged on, but the players' resolve began to falter. Despite their best efforts, the Titans' inexorable advance continued, their presence a constant, looming threat. Yet amidst the despair, Raven's eyes burned with determination. This was no ordinary fight. This was a test, one they couldn't afford to fail. The battlefield was a cacophony of chaos, screams, and clashing weapons. Raven's determined stride toward the Titans seemed almost reckless, yet his resolve burned brighter than ever. Every step he took was met with resistance as the grotesque minions lunged at him, their monstrous forms intent on tearing him apart. He parried and dodged, his blades slicing through the thick, metallic flesh of his enemies. However, for every minion he defeated, another 2 seemed to take its place. His teammates, struggling in their own battles, caught glimpses of Raven's advance. Aelira, her arm bleeding from a deep gash, shouted, "Raven, fall back. You're going to get yourself killed." But her words were drowned out by the deafening roar of a Titan's hammer smashing into the ground nearby. She barely managed to leap out of the way, her bow trembling in her hands as she loosed arrow after arrow at the relentless minions. Kael and Thalric, backs pressed against each other, were fending off a horde of smaller creatures. "He's insane," Kael growled, slashing at an enemy. "We can't even hold our ground here, and he's charging ahead?" Thalric gritted his teeth, his axe swinging in wide arcs. "That's Raven for you. He's got a death wish. But damn it, he's buying us time." Raven's blade, his trusted weapon throughout countless battles, began to crack under the strain. The sound of the metal fracturing sent a chill down his spine. "Not now," he muttered through gritted teeth, his voice barely audible amidst the chaos. "At a time like this, why now?" And then, with a final clash against a minion's armored hide, the sword shattered, fragments scattering across the ground. Raven stumbled back, holding the hilt of what was once a mighty weapon. "I need an assist," he shouted desperately, his voice carrying over the battlefield. But the cries of help and anguish from others drowned him out. His teammates were too overwhelmed, their injuries mounting as they fought valiantly to stay alive. Raven's hand instinctively went to his pocket, feeling the smooth surface of the shiny shard he had received from the first battle. It was his last hope, a mysterious object he hadn't fully understood. With no other options, he pulled it out. The shard began to glow, its light intensifying with each passing second until it became almost blinding. The minions that surrounded him recoiled, their monstrous forms disintegrating into dust under the shard's radiant energy. The battlefield around Raven cleared momentarily, the oppressive presence of the minions replaced by an eerie stillness. The light was a beacon of hope, its brilliance cutting through the despair that had gripped the players and his team. Meanwhile, the Titans continued their rampage. Their massive weapons swung with terrifying precision, obliterating everything in their path. Most of the players had fallen, their fully crafted characters lying lifeless on the ground. To their horror, they remained trapped in the game, unable to log out. The realization that death in the game might have irreversible consequences sent waves of panic through the surviving players. Raven turned to see his teammates, their bodies battered and bloodied, still fighting with every ounce of strength they had left. Aelira's bowstring snapped, leaving her defenseless. Kael's shield was dented beyond recognition, barely holding up against the onslaught. Thalric's axe was chipped, his swings slower and more labored. The internet outside the game was ablaze with reactions. News outlets, streamers, and players flooded forums and social media with their takes on the unprecedented event. What's happening? Why can't we log out? I just lost my max-level character, and I can't even leave the game. The developers, once confident in their control over the servers, were now frantic. They had enlisted the help of hackers and cybersecurity experts, but every attempt to access the system was met with failure. The game had taken on a life of its own, and they were powerless to intervene. Back on the battlefield, Raven held the shard tightly, its light dimming slightly but still glowing with an otherworldly energy. He glanced at his team, his heart sinking at their state. They had fought so hard, yet the odds were still overwhelmingly against them. "We're not done yet," he muttered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The shard's light might have given them a momentary reprieve, but the Titans were still advancing, their colossal forms looming ever closer. Raven knew that this battle was far from over, and the true test of their strength and resolve was yet to come. The battlefield was an eerie mix of chaos and stillness. Titans roamed, their massive forms tearing through the terrain, while the scattered remains of players painted a grim picture of the struggle. Despite the despair, Raven regrouped with his battered teammates. Aelira was clutching her arm, blood trickling down her sleeve. Kael was leaning on his staff for support, his breathing labored, and Thalric looked pale, his armor dented and cracked. Raven wanted to speak, to question everything, the glowing shard, but he held his tongue. There was no time for answers. Survival was the priority. Around them, players who could still fight gathered hesitantly, their weapons drawn but their confidence shaken. Others lay still, pretending to be dead, hoping to avoid the attention of the rampaging Titans. Chapter 8. On another side of the battlefield, Aris, Tink, and Darius stumbled into a dilapidated structure, their breaths ragged. They, too, had taken heavy blows from the minions and barely managed to escape. They huddled together, their expressions grim as they watched the Titans wreak havoc in the distance. "How are we supposed to fight that?" Tink whispered, his voice trembling. "We can't," Darius replied flatly. "Not like this." The question burned in everyone's minds. How can we defeat them? Suddenly, a glitch rippled across the battlefield, like a stone thrown into a still pond. The air shimmered, and then they appeared. Eryon, the fearless warrior from Bladefront, strode forward with a retinue of heavily armed NPCs clad in ornate armor. Their presence radiated authority and power. Beside him walked a familiar figure, a woman. Raven's heart skipped a beat as recognition struck him. The girl from Arcanis who he talked to. As they approached, Eryon's commanding voice rang out. "You've shown your worth, Raven. It's only right to acknowledge your efforts. But this battle is far from over." He gestured to the Titans, their colossal forms silhouetted against the stormy sky. "Those creatures, I've seen them before. They are soldiers from a hidden realm, sealed away for a reason. Why they're here now, I do not know. But know this, they are nearly indestructible. Raven clenched his fists, his frustration mounting. Nearly? He asked, his voice tinged with desperation. Raven thought for a second, seemingly wanted to ask Eryon about something, but he didn't. Eryon nodded, then stepped closer, holding out a small, ornate box. You've lost your blade, but I will give you this. Inside the box lay what appeared to be a broken hilt of a sword. Ancient runes were etched into its surface, glowing faintly. Raven stared at it, confusion and doubt flickering across his face. This is just a broken piece, he said. Eryon smiled faintly. Not for long. Take out the shard you have. The glowing shard in Raven's pocket seemed to pulse as if it had a life of its own. Reluctantly, he pulled it out and held it near the hilt. The moment the two objects were close, the shard shot forward, merging seamlessly with the hilt in a burst of blinding light. When the glow subsided, the hilt now carried the beginnings of a blade, a shimmering, translucent edge that seemed to hum with power. This weapon is not yet complete, Eryon said, his tone grave. There are other pieces you must find. Only then will you have the strength to face the Titans. Before Raven could ask more, a deafening roar echoed across the battlefield. The shadowy figure, watching from his hidden domain, screamed in rage. Why do you have that? That doesn't belong to you. Even here, you're meddling in my plans. The sound reverberated through the game world, shaking the ground and causing players and NPCs alike to freeze. The shadowy figure's voice was filled with terror and fury, and for the first time, it felt as though the mysterious antagonist had lost his composure. The developers watching from their screens exchanged stunned glances. What is going on? Who is he talking about? Online forums erupted in speculation as players tried to piece together the mystery. Raven tightened his grip on the hilt, its glow steadying his nerves. For the first time since this nightmare began, a glimmer of hope sparked within him. He turned to his team, his voice firm. We're not done yet. If this is the key to stopping them, then we'll find the other pieces. Together. Around him, his teammates nodded, their resolve hardening despite their injuries. Eryon stepped aside, letting Raven take the lead. And as the girl locked eyes with Raven, she gave him a small, knowing smile. I'm Lygia. She introduced. Your journey is just beginning. Though I know it's too late, but I hope you can defeat them, she said softly. With renewed determination, Raven and his team prepared to face whatever lay ahead, unaware of the trials and revelations that would come with the search for the blade's missing pieces. The battlefield remained tense, with the Titans' roars echoing through the land, and the cries of injured players creating a cacophony of chaos. Amid this, the shadowy figure, hidden in the swirling dark void beyond the game's reality, seethed with rage. His form was shifting, unstable, as if struggling to contain an overwhelming force. That shard, he spat, his voice distorted and dripping with venom. How dare they? How dare he wield what is rightfully mine? The shadowy figure's amorphous body quivered before it coalesced into a towering humanoid shape, his glowing, hollow eyes burning with hatred. Though not entirely human, he felt emotions more deeply than most mortals. Anger, betrayal, and a deep, festering fear of losing control. As his rage consumed him, he began to laugh. A deep, guttural sound that sent chills through the entire game world. The laugh wasn't just heard. It reverberated through the air, through the players' headsets and speakers, as if it had seeped into the very code of the game. Players watching the battle online froze, their chat feeds exploding with reactions. Who the hell is that? Is this some hidden boss or a glitch? This is terrifying. Developers, explain this now. Bro, I think I'm logging out. This isn't worth losing my sanity over. But the laugh didn't stop. It grew louder, more unhinged, filling the battlefield with a suffocating aura of dread. Players who were hiding or pretending to be dead shivered, some even logging out if they still could. I see it now. The shadowy figure hissed between bursts of manic laughter. You think this battle is over? You fools. It's only just beginning. His voice carried across the battlefield, reaching the ears of every player still alive, and even those watching from the safety of the real world. Struggle all you want. Fight with your pitiful strength. In the end, I will take back what is mine, and this world will fall to me. Meanwhile, Raven stood among his battered teammates, gripping the incomplete sword tightly. The ominous laughter sent shivers down his spine, but he couldn't let it paralyze him. Turning to Eryon, Lygia, and the remaining players who had gathered, he spoke firmly. We don't have time to waste. That thing, whatever it is, wants us to fail. We can't let that happen. If we're going to win, we have to start now. Eryon stepped forward, his expression grim. You're right, but this won't be easy. These titans, they are unlike anything you've fought before. Their strength lies not just in their size, but in their resilience. They regenerate quickly unless you strike at their core. Problem is, finding their core is the challenge. Raven nodded, his mind racing. We'll focus on one titan at a time. If we can bring even one down, it'll give the others hope. We just need to figure out how to weaken it. Lygia chimed in, her voice calm yet urgent. The shard in your blade, it's incomplete, yes, but it still holds power. Use it wisely, Raven. The rest of us will do our part to keep the others at bay. Raven glanced around at the weary faces of his teammates and the remaining players. Though many were injured and terrified, they stood ready, fueled by a shared determination. With Eryon and the armored NPCs by their side, they had a fighting chance, no matter how slim. Let's go, Raven said, taking the lead. Their target was the smallest of the titans, though small was relative. It still towered over them like a mountain. Its movements were slower than the others, but its strikes were devastating, leaving massive craters in the ground with each swing of its enormous club. The battle began with a coordinated assault. Raven darted in close, using the glowing blade to carve deep into the titan's legs, while Aelira and Kael cast ranged attacks to distract it. Eryon and his NPCs flanked the creature, driving their weapons into its exposed joints. But the titan was relentless. With a thunderous roar, it swung its club, sending several NPCs flying. Raven barely dodged the strike, the force of the wind knocking him off balance. This isn't working, Kael shouted, his voice strained. We're barely scratching it. Eryon gritted his teeth. We need to find its core. Focus your attacks where its movements seem the weakest. Raven's eyes darted over the titan's massive frame, searching for any sign of vulnerability. Then he saw it, a faint glow beneath the titan's ribcage. There, he yelled, pointing. Aim for its chest. The group adjusted their attacks, focusing their efforts on the glowing spot. But the titan wasn't going to make it easy. It roared again, its massive hands swiping at them with terrifying speed. As they fought, the shadowy figure watched from his domain, his laughter subsiding into a sinister grin. Yes, struggle, little heroes. Give me a show worth watching. In the end, it will all be for nothing. The figure's presence loomed over the battlefield like a dark cloud, his voice lingering in the minds of everyone who heard it. The viewers online, horrified yet captivated, couldn't tear their eyes away from the unfolding drama. Back on the field, Raven gritted his teeth, pouring every ounce of strength into his strikes. The glowing blade in his hand seemed to resonate with his determination, growing brighter with each swing. This has to work, he thought. It has to. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The titans were formidable, but the true enemy, the shadowy figure, was watching, waiting, and planning his next move. Chapter 9. The battlefield was a wasteland of shattered stone and scorched earth, the ground trembling beneath the titans' monstrous steps. Their towering forms loomed over the players, casting shadows that swallowed the light. Raven tightened his grip on the incomplete sword, feeling the faint pulse of the shard within the blade, as if it was aware of the chaos surrounding them. Focus on the left titan, Raven shouted, his voice cutting through the deafening noise. We bring it down first. The players, though terrified and battered, rallied to his command. Spells lit up the darkened sky. Bolts of fire, arcs of lightning, and bursts of ice streaked toward the designated titan. Arrows whistled through the air, finding purchase in its thick, stone-like hide. But the Titan barely flinched, its glowing eyes scanning the battlefield with a cold, indifferent rage. Eryon sprinted alongside Raven, his twin blades flashing as he delivered precise, calculated strikes to the Titan's legs, aiming for weak points in its armor-like skin. Lygia provided support from a distance, her arrows infused with magic that momentarily slowed the Titan's movements. But it wasn't enough. With a guttural roar, the Titan swung its massive arm in a wide arc, catching a group of players in its path. Their screams echoed as they were thrown like rag dolls, bodies hitting the ground with bone-crushing force. The health bars of several players plummeted to zero, and their avatars disintegrated into shards of light. "No!" someone shouted from the crowd, their voice breaking. "We're losing too many." A wave of panic rippled through the remaining players. Some tried to retreat, but the Titans weren't going to let them escape so easily. Another Titan, noticing the shift in the players' focus, slammed its foot down, sending a shockwave that split the ground open. Dozens fell into the crevice, their cries fading as they were swallowed by darkness. "We can't hold them off," a player screamed, his voice crackling through the group chat. "They're too strong." But Raven refused to give in. Gritting his teeth, he sprinted forward, dodging debris and the Titan's massive fists. The shard in his sword pulsed brighter now, resonating with the danger. He leapt onto the Titan's leg, using the rough, stone-like texture as footholds as he climbed higher. "Cover me," he yelled. Lygia and Eryon reacted instantly, drawing the Titan's attention with a barrage of attacks. Fireballs exploded against its face, and enchanted arrows pierced its glowing eyes, momentarily blinding it. Raven seized the opportunity, reaching the Titan's shoulder, where a faint, pulsating glow indicated its core. "This is it," he whispered to himself. With a surge of strength, he plunged the incomplete sword into the glowing core. The shard within the blade resonated violently, sending shockwaves through the Titan's body. The monster let out a deafening roar, thrashing wildly as cracks spread from the point of impact, its stone skin fracturing like glass. But the Titan wasn't going down without a fight. In a final, desperate move, it flung its arm backward, smashing into Raven and sending him flying through the air. He crashed into the ground, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Pain radiated through his body, but he forced himself to stand, watching as the Titan's body finally crumbled, collapsing into a heap of rubble. A moment of stunned silence followed, broken only by the labored breathing of the surviving players. They had done it, they had taken down one Titan. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining Titans roared in unison, their fury shaking the very air. The ground beneath the players' feet trembled, and from the shadows, the distorted laughter of the shadowy figure echoed once more. "You think this is a victory?" the voice sneered, dripping with malice. "You've only delayed the inevitable. More will come. You will fall." The players exchanged fearful glances. The cost of this battle was already too high, with countless comrades lost, and yet the fight was far from over. Raven, bruised and bloodied, met Eryon's gaze and nodded. "This isn't over," he muttered, determination hardening his voice. "We'll fight until our last breath if we have to." The surviving players rallied once more, their fear tempered by the burning resolve to see this through. They had tasted both victory and loss, but they weren't ready to give up. Not yet. As the Titans advanced, and the shadowy figure's laughter grew louder, the players braced themselves for the next wave. The battle wasn't just for survival anymore, it was for the very soul of their world. Raven's vision blurred, and a sharp pain lanced through his chest. His knees buckled beneath him, and he collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. The world around him felt distant, the sounds of the battlefield fading as the air grew thinner, suffocating him. Darkness crept at the edges of his vision until he finally lost consciousness. "Raven!" Eryon shouted, rushing to his side. He dropped to his knees, shaking him. "Raven, wake up!" Lygia knelt beside them, her face pale with fear. "What's happening to him?" "Kael," clutching a bleeding wound on his side, staggered over. "What's happening now?" he asked softly, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Panic spread through the players. They had fought so hard, only to see their leader fall. On the other side of the battlefield, Aris and the other Echoed struggled to maintain their composure. They had seen Raven and his team defeat a Titan, but fear still gripped their hearts. Their armors were cracked and barely holding together, and their courage was waning fast. Outside the game, the developers were in a frenzy, typing furiously as they tried to regain control of the system. Lines of code flashed across their screens, but nothing seemed to work. The players were still trapped, and the Titans were still wreaking havoc. Then, amidst the chaos, a lone hacker in the corner of the room entered a simple, seemingly basic line of code. No one paid much attention until it worked. A bright light engulfed the battlefield, and the fallen players began to revive, their bodies reforming from shards of light. Health bars refilled, and weapons reappeared in their hands. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then, screams of joy erupted across the battlefield and in the players' rooms, houses, and wherever they are. Players who had thought they'd lost everything were suddenly back on their feet, dazed but alive. Cheers echoed through the air as hope surged once more. But as Raven lay unconscious, his team knew the battle wasn't over. The remaining Titans roared in fury, and the shadowy figure watching from the darkness let out a chilling laugh. The true fight had only just begun. As the events unfolded and players began reviving across the battlefield, the shadowy figure hissed, "Okay, that's one mistake on my part. I'll give it to you, but there are still too many Titans." His voice echoed ominously through the game, sending chills down the spines of players and viewers alike. Meanwhile, in the developer's control room, the lone hacker had an idea. Typing furiously, he tested code after code. Some went through, others didn't. After several attempts, he discovered a crucial loophole. Basic codes could bypass the system's barriers, but complex ones were rejected. Excited, he motioned for one of the developers to come over. Chapter 10. The nearby developers quickly gathered around as he explained his discovery. This breakthrough provided a rare opportunity to assist the players in the battle. Armed with this knowledge, the development team started crafting simple yet effective codes to influence the game world in the players' favor. Back in the game, Raven and his team remained unaware of the developers' efforts. They couldn't rely on outside help, but the sudden revival of fallen comrades filled them with renewed determination. The players, overjoyed to be back, realized they still couldn't log out, yet they chose to regroup and face the Titans head-on. With the developers and hackers injecting supportive basic codes into the system, the players felt subtle boosts in their abilities and defenses. Regrouped and energized, they prepared for the next wave of battle, determined to overcome the monstrous Titans and uncover the mystery behind the shadowy figure's sinister plans. The players began to bring down one Titan after another, executing a strategic plan to isolate them, set traps, and attack in coordinated groups. Despite the overwhelming chaos, their newfound unity turned the tide of battle. Titans still roamed, wreaking havoc, but the players' resilience shone through. On Aris's side, the revival of their fallen comrades brought a surge of hope. Their injuries were gone, and their spirits were lifted. This unexpected second chance allowed them to push forward with their plans, coordinating attacks with precision. Meanwhile, Raven remained unconscious. His team, including Eryon, Aelira, and Kael, panicked as they tried to rouse him. "What's happening now?" Kael whispered, his own injuries making it hard to stand. They saw the players rampaging since being revived. Outside the game, the developers continued their work, guided by the hackers' discovery. Codes were deployed to subtly assist the players, providing boosts in strength, speed, and defense. The battlefield became a dynamic chessboard, with players executing precise moves to trap and isolate the Titans. The players' morale soared as one Titan after another fell. Screams of joy echoed across the battlefield and from the players' homes, but the underlying tension remained. They were still trapped in the game. As the battle raged on, the shadowy figure observed from the shadows, his rage simmering beneath the surface. They may have won this round, he muttered. But the game is far from over. With each passing moment, the players drew a bit closer to victory. But the true mystery of Raven's past and the shadowy figure's ultimate plan loomed over them like an unspoken threat. As the players started to bring down one Titan after another, their strategy of isolating the Titans, setting traps, and attacking in groups began to pay off. The Titans, though formidable, couldn't withstand the coordinated efforts of the revived players, bolstered by the developers' and hackers' basic codes. The battlefield was still chaotic, with Titans wreaking havoc in pockets across the terrain. But the tide was turning. On Aris's side, the players who had fallen were also revived, their injuries miraculously healed. This unexpected advantage allowed them to execute their plans with newfound precision and vigor. They moved as a cohesive unit, systematically targeting the Titans and exploiting their weaknesses. Meanwhile, Raven remained unconscious, his body still and unresponsive. But within the void of his mind, questions swirled. How could an NPC possess memories of his own? Trapped in this darkness, Raven witnessed fragments of a past he couldn't comprehend. He saw himself clad in ancient, radiant armor, leading battalions of warriors who were, in fact, the very Titans they now fought against. The memory was vivid, yet its meaning eluded him. The dark side of the void made him think even more. Who am I, really? As he questioned himself, a surge of information buried flocked to him. After a while it stopped. Suddenly, Raven's eyes snapped open, and he gasped for air. Lygia, Eryon, Aelira, Kael, and Thalric were on standby, their faces etched with concern. They rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. Though they were still injured, the supportive codes had no effect on them. Raven's gaze swept across the battlefield, taking in the ongoing carnage. Without a word, he began to walk forward, his steps steady despite the chaos around him. Thalric reached out, trying to stop him. Raven, what are you doing? Raven shook his head, his eyes resolute. I have a way, he replied softly. He continued toward the center of the battlefield, the fighting slowing as players and Titans alike noticed his approach. Then, standing amidst the chaos, Raven began to chant, an ancient, unknown language that resonated with a power no one could understand. The Titans froze, their monstrous forms turning to face him. The players, confused and wary, halted their attacks, watching in stunned silence. Raven's chants grew louder, echoing across the battlefield. The developers monitoring the game were baffled. Even the creators of Eldoria didn't recognize the language. As his voice reached a crescendo, the Titans began to lower their weapons and armor, their massive forms kneeling before him. The players and viewers online were in shock. Chats buzzed with frantic questions, theories flying as everyone tried to make sense of what was happening. Raven finished his chant and approached the Titans. Though scattered across the battlefield, they all seemed to understand his command. One Titan, larger than the rest, spoke to Raven in the same ancient tongue, its voice a deep rumble that reverberated through the ground. After a tense moment, the Titans rose, retrieved their armors, and began moving toward the portals scattered around the battlefield. One by one, they stepped through, disappearing until the last portal sealed shut. The battlefield fell silent. The players stood in stunned disbelief, their weapons lowered as they tried to process what they just witnessed. Raven's team was no different. Shock and astonishment etched across their faces. Then, a collective cheer erupted from the players, their victory finally sinking in. But amidst the celebration, Raven's expression remained unreadable. He stared at the spot where the last Titan had vanished, the ancient words still echoing in his mind. Something had awakened within him, something that neither he nor anyone else could yet understand. The golden scroll hovered in the sky, its brilliant light casting a warm glow across the battlefield. Intricate symbols danced along its edges, shifting and changing as if alive. The scroll unfurled, revealing ornate lettering that shimmered with an otherworldly hue. Congratulations, champions of the 7 games. Through unity and resilience, you have vanquished the impossible. Your courage has reshaped the fate of this world. Raven, his expression unreadable, reached out and touched the scroll. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him. Images and knowledge flooded his mind, fragments of ancient lore, secrets buried deep within Eldoria's code, and the true origins of the Titans. Alongside this revelation, a list of rewards materialized in the air for all players to see. Each player received rare artifacts, legendary weapons, and exclusive titles that marked them as heroes of the greatest battle the gaming community had ever witnessed. Special abilities were unlocked, tailored to each player's class and playstyle, enhancing their power beyond anything previously imaginable. Back in the real world, the gaming community erupted in a frenzy. Streams were flooded with joyous screams, some players openly weeping, overwhelmed by the unexpected victory. Social media exploded with posts, theories, and memes, as players tried to piece together the unprecedented event. However, not all reactions were celebratory. The players from WonderWhimsy, who had chosen to hide rather than fight, became the target of widespread mockery. Chats were filled with sarcastic remarks and jokes at their expense, their decision to avoid the battle becoming a viral topic. To be continued. Click like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Till next time.